So the idea behind this specific talk, not the Back to College series, Smriti, is I'm sure at least our TYBC students and maybe even the SYBC students have questions about what is necessary to do in order to go abroad as a student and then eventually move into academia. So we'll ask some questions about that. The students definitely will, so will I. But I want to begin by asking a question which I hope you answer as honestly as possible. And I know that both Asava sir and I are on this call, but please don't worry. Please be as honest as you can possibly be. How much of a gap was it between what you learned at Gokhale and what you learned abroad? And how did you make up that gap?
Okay, so that's a very hard question. So like very broadly speaking, I don't think there was a lot of gap in the content that I was taught before I came to US for my graduate school. I think the big difference was like how that knowledge is tested. So I remember most of the exams that I had in Gokhale and even like my undergrad in Delhi University, they were more, they were testing like if you knew this stuff, basically like if you had done, if you had memorized stuff before the exam, then you would do well in the exam. But here the exams were completely application based. So they would, when you hear from students that they say that you were taught something in class and then you were tested on something entirely different, that was true. We were taught like how, like the theory and how, what the definitions are and how the models work. But then in the exams, we were basically just given case studies to solve and figure out it was to the extent that you would read a question and you would be like, I don't know what applies here. Like, what concept am I supposed to think about to answer this question? And so it was kind of like that. It would make you really think. And having said that, the way the exams were also tested was different. So, even if you could not solve the entire, like the proof or the math in the question, if you could just even write it in words that this is what I'm thinking the question's asking about, and this is what it is, then professors would still understand, okay, at least you got the point of the question. So that was the big difference that I realized when I came here.
Okay, and a follow-up question for both the students and the teachers on this call.
Yeah.
Given this, and given that a certain percentage of our students will always go abroad, you've been a student over here and you're a professor over there. At the margin, what do you think we should be tweaking in our approach over here in India to better prepare students for studying abroad?
So I feel like if we were to include a little bit more of the real world issues in class and discuss how what we're talking about applies, just to solve those real case studies. And it can be like very simple things also, like when you're doing principles of micro, when you're just starting with micro, you can think about, I don't know, like how incentives work or how firms make some decisions, just like, basic things like even opportunity cost, how that applies to how people make decisions. So just a small way to start understanding how you can apply the things that we're doing in class to real world cases. I feel like that, and then maybe in the exams, focusing less on memorization, but again, like giving like a case study to solve so that you can see how the students are thinking about how to solve that question. Yeah, and I mean, I'm not saying that there were no courses here that had all of that theory. Like we had a lot of, there are those economic history type courses where you have to memorize the stuff. But in most cases, like micro, macro, econometrics, all the questions were fully applied. Yeah, and I feel like econometrics was one of the courses that I kind of had to struggle with in my first year of grad school here because so the way that they teach econometrics here, and at least in the PhD courses, is that when you come here in the fall semester, the first semester that you do is statistics, and it has nothing to do with economics at all. The way that they're teaching is basically just statistics, probability, like the way that statistics students or math students would be studying it. And then the second semester is when they actually talk about econometrics, and I feel like my entire semester, the big thing that we kept on talking about was just understanding causality and figuring out how that works. And so I think OLS was there, but that was a very small portion. And then the other things that we did, like IVs and regression and discontinuity, all of that was things that I had not done, and or at least I did not remember studying or understanding well when I was in India, basically. So, yeah.
Okay, so that in terms of how we as teachers might want to tweak either the textbook or the approach a little bit. But as students, when you're studying in India, and this is not unique to Gokhale, actually, I'm talking about the
Yeah.
entire country. Say, for example, you assume that somebody somewhere is struggling through Damodar Gujarati because the course requires it. Not my favorite textbook, not Asavas's favorite textbook, can't be anybody's favorite textbook, but we all have to go through that ritual of reading Gujarati. Over and above that, as a student, whether in the undergrad level or the postgrad level, what else can a student do to prepare himself or herself better for America or any country for that matter?
Yeah, one second. Do you mind if I just get up to shut the curtain? The sun's coming in my face.
Please.
Okay. So, yeah, so how can students prepare? So I guess when they're in university, when they're learning, I think one thing that can be done is maybe just get in. This is something that I did not do at all, and I had no idea even when I had come to the US. You can always like Google and look at some of the current research that's been going on, just to get an idea of like how things are done and what can you do to apply, again, the concepts that we're doing in class. So especially for econometrics, to see how tools of regression analysis are being used to solve, just like, I don't know, policy behavior or consumer behavior, human behavior, all of that, or that can be really, I think, helpful. And there are a lot of websites that I had no idea about. I don't think I even knew how to use Google Scholar properly, but obviously there's Google Scholar. And then there are other websites like NBER has a working paper series. That is very good to just get an idea of what is going on. Yeah, and then if people can attend workshops or some sort of seminars where there are papers that are being presented, even that is very good, because that way we can get to understand like what's the work in progress paper, where you understand how things are being formulated and what people are thinking about. I think that would be helpful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, on a related note, and this has been my experience, I have taught some American students who spent a semester abroad over here in Pune. And I've taught Indian students. I would say the one key difference that I've noticed has been consistent every single year has been the fact that American students are much more not just willing, but eager to speak in class. Getting a conversation going about whatever it is that is being discussed in class is much easier with American students, but getting Indian students to speak up, to argue with a professor, to disagree with a professor is very, very difficult. A, have you noticed this yourself? And B, how much of a problem was it for you as a student in America?
Yeah, that is a very true thing that you've picked up on. I think it's like a culture thing. In the US, I don't know, the faculty or the students think that faculty are more like, colleagues that you can talk to and discuss things with, and they can argue also without being rude, I guess. But in India, I think this is true a lot for like the Asian countries, India, China, anyone who's from like the Southeast Asian countries, but they're like arguing or doing that back and forth kind of a conversation is just considered rude. So that was a big hurdle for me too, because so in the first year when we are just doing core courses like micro, macro, econometrics, game theory, those are like lecture heavy courses, and professors would ask questions, but like even if I knew the answer, I would never raise my hand. I think I was just, like scared or whatever, but like that kind of fear that is there, I realized much later that it's just harming me, because professors would not know if I knew the answer or if, even if I was paying attention. So yeah, that's something that I would have liked to have worked on like much earlier, because that really does hurt the student and their progress in the class. And another thing which I did not know about, but here, like the professors and all faculty have office hours, which is basically just for the students to go talk to the professor. And I did not know what office hours meant when I came here. So I never really went to the professor's office, even if I was struggling with an assignment or a question. And I feel like I'm more one of those people who like to suffer in silence and just like cry about it, but by myself. But that was something that again harmed me, and I feel like harms a lot of students if they're not going to be talking to the professor in classroom or outside of the classroom. So yeah, and I don't know like what to do about it. I thought it was maybe like a personal thing that I'm just an introvert and I don't like doing that. But Americans in general are much more open to discussing and doing that back and forth without sounding rude, or it is just it's not considered weird for a student to answer back and question the professor. So yeah.
A question that I would have liked to have asked, but I don't really think it's implementable is, do you have any tips for students to get better at discussing while they're over here in India? But it doesn't happen across the length and breadth of the country. Right? It's very dependent on which university you're in, what your peers are like.
Yeah.
But there is a, yeah, sorry, please go ahead.
No, go ahead. Continue your
I was
question.
saying there is a follow-up question that I did have, now that you're on the other side of the fence, so to speak, and now you have students maybe from India, maybe from China or other parts of the world coming in, and you know about this problem. How do you help students get over this reluctance to speak? That's a selfish
I'm
question. I want to learn
trying.
how to get better. So it's a question that I'm
Yeah, I
asking.
don't know. It's like it's very weird, right? You can't. So when you're teaching, like you can't pinpoint to a student and like point them and be like, "What about you? Did you get it?" That would be weird. So you
Right.
can't do that. And so you have to kind of try to create an atmosphere where everyone feels comfortable in at least talking out loud, if not to the professor, then at least to the person next to them. So when I'm teaching, when I try to do a lot of questions in class, and when I give them questions to do, I just tell them that talk to the person next to you, and at least if you're not talking to me, at least talk to the person next to you. So I feel like students feel much more comfortable talking to another student than the professor straight away. And so once they've discussed it with the people next to them, I feel like they're more confident, or at least they realize that they're not the only ones suffering. Everyone's in the same boat, and then they're more friendly while to ask questions in the class, or at least pose towards the professor. So that's something that I try to do. And another thing that I do is like I really explain what office hours are, because I know I did not know what they are. And a lot of students who come to college in first year, they don't really also know what office hours are. So I just tell them that it's time that I have dedicated just for you. So you can come to talk to me and even just come say hi. I really like talking to my students. I'm like, I don't mind you just coming and telling me what's going on, and in the class, outside of the class. And I feel like that also encourages at least some of them to come. And I'm always surprised when students show up in my office, because I'm like, oh, like, do you have a question? I'm like, oh, did I do something in class? Like, you want to discuss something? Did you not understand something? But they're like, no, I just wanted to introduce myself and say hi. And I was like, oh, so sweet, thank you. So yeah, and I'm like a new professor. I think I'm like still new. I'm only like 2 years old as a faculty, so I'm still trying to understand how things go.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I feel like, for students, so the other question that you had asked, for students who are in India who are wanting to discuss, and I feel like don't be scared. I think that's the one thing I can say. Like, don't fear. Everyone is new to this, like all the other students, everyone's in the same boat. So if you have a question, then somebody else probably also has the same question, or if you're thinking about something, then someone else has the same thought. So just talk it out loud, and that really helps. And that was something that I realized even also in my first year. So when I was in first year in graduate school, when I was struggling with like the entire, the change of how the tests are done and like the application-based focus, I realized like that having that study group and that group of friends to do or study together or do the questions together, that was really helpful. So because again, when you're with a student, when you're with another student, you're in the same class, you feel like you're more comfortable with them, and so it was easier to just get talking in that group rather than in a class of like 30 people. So yeah, start small, don't be scared, and discussions always help. So yeah.
All right. Now, the second section of my series of questions is the meat of the matter as far as the students are concerned. It's about what I'm going to call the art and skill of applying for a study abroad program.
Okay.
How do you optimize for a university? So I often get students coming into my office and asking which university should I apply to, or this is a top ranking of whatever, top 50, top 100, as it may be. I have never applied to go abroad for studying, but I tell them that if I ever were to, what I would do is I would optimize to the professor rather than the university. So if I know or have some idea of what it is that I want to research or who I want to work with, trying to build out a rapport with that professor and optimizing for the professor but not the university is how I would approach it. Am I just giving really bad advice? Does it make sense? What was your approach like and how would you change it?
So my approach was like a chaos. I think it wasn't planned. But yeah, but knowing what I know now, what you're saying is definitely true, or like it's definitely correct to a certain extent. The one thing that could be an issue in that is that professors also tend to leave universities. And so, like if you're just focusing on one professor in that university, it has happened, professors leave. Which is something that happened kind of to me. But yeah, so focusing on just one professor might not be the best thing. Maybe focus on a group of professors. And so I feel like, I guess, when you're starting to apply abroad, the biggest thing is to figure out, I guess, what the requirements are. So GRE, and GRE is something that universities really, really focus on. I know they say that they want like a full packet and SOP and letters of recommendation, but like think about it from the university point of view. The university might not know like how hard Gokhale exams are or how hard ISI exams are. The one thing that they're using to test to understand your quant ability is GRE. So really, really focus on GRE and make sure that you get like a really good percentile. I think the minimum is like the 80th percentile. The higher percentile you're in for quant, the better it is, the higher ranked university you can apply to. And then having said the ranked stuff, rankings are, yeah, they do not focus on the rankings at all, unless you're applying to like Harvard versus some smaller school. I would probably say that to think of rankings instead of like the top 1, 2, 3, but like more like a basket maybe. So like the top 30 versus the next 30 versus the next 30, because I feel like Harvard versus like Chicago, they're not very different. All of those big schools and research universities, they'll probably have professors that are, all professors that are good in all areas. So like if you do end up going there, then great for you. But you'll probably find someone that you want to work with, like irrespective of whatever field you're interested in. But like if you know that you want to target like not the top 30, but the next 30, then in that case, I guess the professors and the fields really matter quite a lot, because I don't want to say the lower rank, but the relatively lower ranked schools, there may, like some schools are known for some fields. I think like Michigan State is known for econometrics because they will register, and then there's another school that's known just for international economics. So if you know what field you're interested in, then definitely apply to that place. But like rankings don't matter. Yeah. So yeah. you're right. Rankings don't really matter. Professors matter more than rankings, but I would say instead of focusing on just one professor, maybe look for a field that you're interested in. Yeah, and I feel like even to try to understand what field you're interested in, it's easier said than done, right? Because when I just passed my undergraduate and I wanted to do masters in Gokhale, I don't think I knew what I wanted to do in terms of like the field of economics and like the fields of, so there's labor, there's health, there's international economics, there is industrial organization, econometrics, or like applied or microeconomic theory. So all of these fields, again, if you just look at websites online, so there is this great website if you're applying to the US especially, there is American Economic Association, and so the AEA, they have like a great website. They have lots of resources for undergraduate students, for graduate students who are interested in applying, and even like so, and they have even listed like a bunch of different professors in the US who have given advice on like what to do. I wish I had known about this website when I just got into grad school, because they even have like advice on how you should be studying when you're in your first year, when you're in your second year, like what should your priorities be. All of that stuff is there, and it's just like a great resource. So yeah, just look at that website to try and get an idea of like what fields exist. And maybe once you've shortlisted what you want to do and what you're interested in, and in that case, you can shortlist universities, and also keeping in mind your GRE. Yeah. And another thing, sorry.
Yeah. No, please.
If you're planning on taking the GRE, just like plan ahead, like really ahead. So like if you're wanting to go to grad school in, let's say 2024, then you should be done with GRE and like all the main documents by like summer of 2023. I took the GRE in like October the year before, and I feel like I did not have enough time, because you can take GRE multiple times and just give the score of the GRE that has like the highest score. And I think so. Like when you take the GRE, you get the score in like 2 weeks or something. I don't really remember, but so yeah. So all of these things take time, basically. So if you start ahead, or if you start early and plan ahead, then that way you'll have lots of time to figure out what you want to do, where, and all of that.
So the reason I'm smiling a little bit is because I'm sure you've thrown some of the TYBSc students into a state of panic. If they hope to apply for August 22, you're saying they should have written the GRE by now.
Yeah.
Excellent. I think now's a good time to pause and ask at least some of the TYBSc students to ask questions if they want to about all of what we've spoken about so far.
And they should be a little bit tension, no?
So I have no clue about when you're supposed to start writing a test, but at least for the TYBSc students, if I understand what Smriti has said correctly, now is the time to start preparing, and latest by around September or October, you want to be done with the GRE. No pressure, but that's what she seems to be saying.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's not mandatory.
Yeah, it's just that, it'll give you a peace of mind. You know that you'll have multiple chances at the GRE in case you want to do that. It's just that the later you do it, the more restricted you're going to be. And also because I think a lot of graduate schools, at least for PhD, I'm not really sure just for masters, but at least if you're going to do the the PhD program, in that case for international students, the deadlines are in December. And so, you want to have your material ready kind of before the deadline, so you can have multiple checks and edits and all that.
Speaking of edits, the next question is about something I hate answering in academia over here in India, but anybody who's a professor in India has to go through this. How to help somebody draft a good SOP? I'm sure you played the game when you applied. What tips and tricks do you have for us?
Oh, I had written an SOP, and I think I'd gotten it edited by like multiple people in India. And then 2-3 years later, when I was in grad school, I was talking to one of the professors and another fellow Indian student, and then somehow I looked at my SOP and I was like, what have I written? Like, what is this? So maybe don't do that. Like, don't look at your SOP 3 years later. But yeah, writing SOP is so hard. Like, they tell you that it has to be highly personalized and really unique and just your experiences, like your life story. But then you're like, what if I've not done something, unique? Like, I've been leading my usual basic life. Like, what am I supposed to do? So, and I feel like a lot of people go through that, or it was just me, I don't know. But it's hard to write that because you want to make it seem like it's a story, and obviously it should be focused on economics. Like, why do you want to do masters or PhD in economics, and how did you come to decide to do that? And then also try to make it a little different from your resume, so something that your resume doesn't tell. Another thing I would probably say is that think of that as an interview. So when graduate schools are looking at your applications, they don't get to talk to you, or at least most of them don't get to. Some might have interviews, but mostly they don't get to talk to you, and that's like one way that they're looking at your application to figure out if you're if you're a good, if you're well suited for that program, or if you'll fit in and all of that. And so yeah, think of that as like a technical interview. So you want to make sure that the school knows everything that they should about you and why you think you would be a good fit to the program. And so, like, for example, if you're applying to, let's say, Chicago, which is like a free market place, so you want to maybe tell them why you are in favor of like the free market ideology and something like that. So something that tells them that why you're interested. And then also focus on the specific field and the professors that you're interested in working with, not just like one line, not a line in the end, but like a proper paragraph where you can tell them why you're interested in working with them. So they know that you've done research about the place, and they know that you're really into the place. And then probably try to get it edited by people, so like, a family member, a professor, maybe a colleague, and then maybe some people that in the US. So some seniors, if who are already in the US, they would also be a good resource to just tap into to get an idea of like where your SOP stands, and especially if they are in a school where you were interested in applying.
But this sounds like something that should take up a lot of your time. Writing a SOP, A, is difficult, and B, is important. Yeah,
I agree. And for a person like me who is a procrastinator, I try to not be that. Try to just again like get started early on that, just so you have a lot of time. Because anyway, like writing is hard, right? And you have to write about yourself, which is also hard. So writing like 3 pages or 2 pages about yourself and your life story, it's a hard thing. So just get started early and just do it.
Okay, the final section of my list of questions, we have about maybe 15, but at least 10 minutes for this. I want to speak to you about, this is a bit of a hypothetical, but if you somehow got the chance to go back and speak to Smriti of 2008, you would have been in SY, BSc, I'm guessing at that point of time. 2007, 2008. What advice would you give to that? Yeah, what advice would you give to that Smriti? What should she have been doing more of? What she should have been doing less of, given what you know today?
So if I would go back to talk to an undergraduate Smriti, so I think I would have tried to know what I want to do, because I think I was really lost. And I feel like maybe a lot of students at that age are like trying to figure out, what you are and what you want to do. So just spend some time in trying to do that. And then like once you do realize that, you are interested in research. So, okay, I'll back up and tell like what happened.
Yeah.
So when I was in undergraduate, I think I was in Delhi University, and I was just focusing on like exams and, like the usual stuff. And then after that, when I was in masters, that's when I think I'd gone for internships after the first year. And so those internships are really good. I realized when I was figuring out like where I want to go for an internship, I'd gone into like a corporate to do like a 2-month internship, and I realized that I don't like doing that. And so I thought, okay, maybe let's try a research organization. And that's kind of where, when I was working with my mentor, he and I were talking and discussing, and then I realized that, I really like doing research. And that's when he had actually told me that if I want to do research, I should probably think about graduate school. And if I want to do that, then I should, apply to the US for a PhD. And so I feel like definitely get an internship and talk with your mentor. And yeah, I'm pretty sure I was like a very shy person, and so that conversation would have been very awkward for me. But yeah, don't feel awkward about such conversations, because you're trying to learn, and so don't be shy. Don't just kind of be out there and engage in those discussions, because it will help you ultimately. And yeah, so that internship was definitely helpful. So go get an internship, try to see what you like doing. And then I think another thing I would say is that, or at least I would tell myself to do is, look online to get an idea of what's out there, like what is going on. So there are so many topics and research questions that we don't even think about, but they're all economics related. And, those are, some of them can be very interesting. So if you just know what's going on, then you're better aware of what you like versus what you don't. So I feel like that would be helpful. And then what else? Yeah, also learn about, I think this is something that I did not do. So learn about the different ideologies in economics. I'm sure that, I think there was a class in Gokhale on that, but I don't think I really enjoyed doing it when I was doing it. But it was really helpful. So just try and get an idea of economics is so varied and diversified in all of these different schools of thought, and how different models work within those schools. And I think it's just really exciting. So just to get an idea of what has been done was also great. So try to do that. I don't know what else. I would have definitely written a better SOP. And been serious about all of these deadlines. And yeah, because I remember I feel like when I gave the entrance exam for Gokhale, even then I wasn't sure if I would get in, and I was like, we'll see what happens. And then similarly, when I was taking GRE and TOEFL and applying, my parents, I think if you ask my parents to this day, they would say that we really didn't think you would go. We really didn't think you would, you were serious about it. And I was like, yeah, I wasn't. I wish I had been. So.
True. It's an unfair question to ask in the sense that, at least in my case, I can think of a dozen different things I would want to tell Ashish of that age. But it's difficult to know for sure what you want to do in your life retrospectively. By that I mean, I know now what I would want to tell him, but I don't think Ashish of that age would have listened. And that's a whole separate
Yeah, same. Yeah.
So, continuing the same theme, but on a related note, Gaurav Sabnis, I don't know if you know him, he's a professor of marketing at, I think, NYU, if I'm not mistaken. He had come up with a Twitter thread on his SOP, and he said the one thing that he speaks about, doesn't think he wanted to change, but top of the list was just using simpler English. We in India, when we write to impress, we think that sitting down with a thesaurus is the best thing we can do. But simpler sentences in simpler English often carries more weight, apparently, abroad. Would you agree with that, or would you want to add to that?
I definitely agree with that. And that was another struggle of mine. So I'm very glad you brought it up. Yeah, so one of the reasons why I had my head in my hands when I was reading my SOP 3 years later was because of this. I was like, what have I written? It is so complicated. I can't understand what I have written. So how will anyone else understand? And this was something that really I realized was I think in my third year or fourth year, I think. So when you're in a PhD program, like I said, first year is just the core economics courses. Second year is when you start taking field courses. And at the end of those field courses, you don't really have an exam, but you have to submit like a field paper or like a term paper. And so that's when I started writing papers. And so those term papers, you don't really get a lot of feedback on that, unfortunately. But if I compared what I had written versus what like an American had written, it was very different. And then when I was writing like my first draft of my job market paper, or when I was completing my PhD, that my advisor had just marked everything in red. I feel like I had never gotten an assignment that marked in red, because he was like, "What is this? Like, what are you trying to say? Just say what you're saying." So so I think it is. I don't know if it's like the effect of British English or the way we are taught English in India, which is like fine. But I guess when you're writing in economics, it has to be more direct and like using active voice and like shorter sentences. So I think that they say that if you're writing a sentence, if it goes more than like 3 lines, when you're writing in Word, it is a long sentence. You need to break it up into two, and just instead of using further, because, and after, and all of those like words, the words that connect sentences, instead of those, just break it up into shorter, smaller, direct sentences. Yeah,
Going
that
through
is
that,
true.
for the life for me, remember who I was telling. So one of the students on from the BSc program was telling me the same thing. I use 4 instead of 3. Maybe that's the Indian in me, but it's the same logic. A sentence shouldn't stretch that far out,
Yeah.
and it's something all of us need to get better at, writing simpler English.
Yeah,
You touched
and
upon, yeah. Sorry,
so
go ahead.
there are a
No,
lot
no.
of resources on that also. So I guess I realized that when I was revising my job market paper, but again on the AEA website maybe, but otherwise there is this economist. The last name is McCloskey. She has
Deirdre McCloskey, of course.
yeah, Deirdre McCloskey. So she has I think a paper or a book on economical writing, or
Yeah.
how writing is done in economics. So just look at that. And there's another article, I don't know by who, but it's actually like a 10 bullet points that you should follow when you're writing in economics. And those are also very helpful for me. So maybe when you're writing your SOP, you want to kind of look at that. If you're applying for economic schools, they want to see that you can write in economics, and they want it to be like easier to write English. So maybe just look at that and follow those 10 bullet points. And then I think that will also be like that will help to improve the writing.
Okay. All right. Now, for the students, Smriti has mentioned a job market paper, and there's a fun video on AEA itself about how Nobel Prize winning economists both wrote their job market paper and gave interviews on the basis of their job market paper. But Smriti, the question I wanted to ask is this: a job market paper is essentially something that you're interviewed on when you apply to a university, correct?
Yeah.
Most of the BSc students are now either
Sorry,
going to start. Yeah.
can you say your question again?
Yeah, I was saying most of the BSc students are going to want to either write an undergrad thesis, or the HY-BSc students will want to write one next year and will want to start thinking about it right now. Somewhat similar to a JMP in the sense that you want to pick a topic that showcases how well you know your topic, is something that is manageable, so shouldn't be something that is out of your scope as a student, and yet at the same time should stand apart. To the extent that you're comfortable speaking about your job market paper, could you speak to us about whatever tips you have to share about how to go about picking a topic that manages to fit all of these requirements?
Okay, so yeah, all of those constraints are, it's like one of those, I don't know what it's like, but like that impossible triangle kind of a thing. You have to do something that is new, you have to do something that can be done, and then you also have to make sure that it can be done within that time frame. And so it's hard. But at least like for the job market paper that I'm talking about, that was like my PhD dissertation, and I had like 3 years to work on it. So, that is still quite a large amount of time compared to like a master's thesis or an undergraduate thesis. I don't know how much time people get, but I'm assuming it's not more than 1 year. So yeah, so it's hard. I feel like the easiest again would be to try to get an idea of what's been done. So let's say that you have a very broad topic in your mind. Let's say that so in my case, like I was interested in like women outcomes and children outcomes, and more like women outcomes. And I was interested in developing countries. And so like, this was all that I knew that I wanted to do. I went to my advisor and I said that, this is what I'm interested in. And so I had decided on the advisor based on kind of like the fields in my department. And so I went to him and I said, this is what I'm interested in. And he said, okay, so chat with me. And we basically spent hours on Google Scholar to try and get an idea of like, what this even means. Like, what do I want to do? And so I wanted to do like women outcomes in the labor market. And so I'd gone to like a labor economics professor. And then we just went through papers and papers, and and then he also sent me some papers to read. So there was like a huge amount of reading to do to just get an idea of like what the paper does and if that even interests me. So that's kind of where you start. You have a broad idea in your mind. You look at papers to see what they've done. Think about like, is this question even interesting to me? So like, when I say women outcomes in the labor market, it could have been things like migration or, like job promotion. I wasn't really interested in all of that. Like I realized I was more interested in things like gender wage gap or like even labor force participation. What are the women even doing is what I wanted to know. And so that was again like a very broad topic, right? Like there is no research question in that. So once I started looking at papers for India to see like what have people done, and then I realized just through looking at the data that like female labor force participation in India has been declining, and it's been declining since like 1980. So that itself was like a very interesting phenomenon to look at, and I was like, why is that happening? And then we eventually narrowed down to the question that, okay, like what's the effect of husband's wages on like a wife's labor force participation? Is it that in a household or in India, if the incomes are rising, if the wages are rising, is it that because of that, is it that women are not wanting to work? And is that why female labor force participation is decreasing? And that was something that we realized not many people had done. And I'm saying not many because there were still like 3 papers who had done it, but it was something they hadn't done what I was doing. And I had some extra data that they hadn't used, and it was a little different approach. So it doesn't have to be like a super unique research question. As long as you're adding something to what's been done and you have some contribution to the literature, then, that is still like a valid contribution. So yeah, I feel like even though people might have done it, if you can just do something different, maybe use a similar methodology to another question, or if somebody has done something for India, but they haven't done it for, let's say, US, or maybe I should do it the other way around because I don't think that would have happened. But if somebody has done something, yeah, so if somebody has done something for the US and developed countries, you want to see if a question like that is valid for developing countries. Something like that. So you can always pick up a question or methodology from one paper to another question and see if someone has done it. And if not, then you have a paper.
Yeah. Smriti, thank you so much for making the time. We have about 10 minutes left. So if students have any questions, please. Maybe there's a question, I'll read it out. Do you think that going abroad for a master's makes sense for someone who isn't inclined towards academia?
Yeah, it definitely does. So, again, I feel like you still want to know what you want to do after the master's. So, in the sense, like if you're not interested in academia, but you're interested in industry, what kind of jobs are you interested in? So, are you interested in like macroeconomic modeling kind of thing, or are you interested in financial economic side of thing, or are you interested in data analytics? Because that will help you understand what masters you want to go for. A lot of the masters are like specialized masters, or you can choose fields in your second year of the masters. So you can definitely go for a masters even if you're not interested in academia. One thing that you might want to pay attention to is that the expenses of doing a master's, especially if you're going for a master's in the US. And I think also for UK, masters are typically not funded. So you would have to, have scholarships or your own funding or some external funding to apply for if you're going to just for masters. And that is kind of one reason why I decided to go for PhD, because most of the PhDs in the US come with full funding and scholarships and even like a stipend that they pay you for research assistants or teaching assistants. And so it's basically like a fully paid ride that you're doing for learning. And so that seemed to me to be like a good thing to do, and that's why I ended up doing like a PhD, among other reasons. Let's not just say that. But yeah, so it makes sense to go for a master's even if you're interested in industry. Just try to maybe have some work experience before you go for a master's, or through internships or like a full-time job, so you know what you're interested in and what you want to use the master's degree for, and then apply and go for it.
All right, lots of questions. I'll keep on asking them. Yash asks, nowadays there are integrated masters plus PhD programs. What are your thoughts about them?
So the program that I was in was kind of like an integrated master's plus PhD program. Basically, I think what that means is that you apply for a PhD program and you have your first year of coursework. At the end of the first year, you have to do your PhD qualifiers. If you and I think you have 2 attempts mostly to do those qualifiers. And so the first attempt is at the end of your first year. The second attempt is maybe in the middle of your second year or at the end of your second year. I think it varies for different universities. And so if you do not pass the qualifiers, you basically get a master's degree and say bye to the program. But if you pass the qualifiers, and then you can move on to the third year where you start with your research and start with your PhD. So those integrated master's plus PhD programs are great because they're the ones who actually offer you funding. And so basically in the first year, it's actually really great because in the first year, for my case, my first semester, I was getting paid to do nothing. I had no job. And I did not even have, I wasn't even grading. And so that was really great. And then I was getting paid to study and do my coursework. And professors are very understanding, especially in the first year of your PhD, because they know that you're dealing with a lot of coursework and assignments and quizzes and exams. So they're very easy on you. And even though you're getting paid to do the work, it's not like you'll have a lot of work that you can't concentrate on your courses and studies.
Okay. Rahul has learned his cost minimization lessons well. He asks, can you submit the same SOP with minor changes to different universities, or should you be writing different SOPs from scratch for each application?
Oh, so I think it will be more efficient to do the first one, right? Like submit the same SOP with minor changes. We'll make sure that those changes are not like super minor, because you are catering to those different universities, especially if the universities are really different in like their fields and professors and all of that. So definitely personalized for each university, but it doesn't have, because your life story is the same. You can't write a different life story for each SOP. So have the same basic structure, but then make some changes for each university depending upon like what the university is.
Okay. Paras asks, is studying abroad worth it as it costs a lot? Paras, I mean, as an economist, I would say it depends on what you think you're going to be able to earn as a consequence of having studied abroad. Is how I would answer it. But Smriti, what would your answer be?
Yeah, I would say the same, right? Because so let's say that you get into a master's at Harvard and it's costing you like some 90 lakhs a year. Would you say no to it? I mean, it's something that you would be ready to invest in, because you're investing in yourself. You're building your human capital. And at the end of that master's from Harvard, even if it costed you so much, you can probably recover all of that cost in like maximum 5 years, even if you were to live a lavish life. So I feel like it kind of depends. But if you're getting into like a master's program at not a well-known university, and you think it's like too expensive, and you won't be able to recover the cost after, then maybe not do it. So it kind of depends like what you're getting. And like I said, the PhD programs are fully funded. Most of them are, like if you get a good GRE score and all of that, they'll fully fund it. And so it wouldn't really cost you. It's just that it wouldn't have any monetary cost. Let me put it like that. You would be away from family and all of that, but yeah, it wouldn't really have a monetary cost.
Correct. Jeet asked a question to which, Smriti, you may not know the answer, but I'll run it past you. Some colleges, he says, maybe LSE, ask for an honors bachelor's degree in economics. Is BSc considered for an honors degree?
I think it is. I'm not really sure. So like my degree for my undergraduate was economics honors in Delhi University. I don't really know what the honors does actually. At least in the US, like honors is a different program, and I don't think they have such kind of a distinction in India. So I feel like it would be, but I'm not really sure.
And Jeet, I'll give you the same answer. I would be very surprised if LSE decided to not recruit somebody just because you didn't have honors after your BSc. I don't think it will make any difference.
And I'm sure they will, they look at your transcripts and everything, so they'll see what courses you've taken. I would say that definitely like some of the courses, they really value quite a lot. So make sure like you show in your transcripts that you've taken like multiple calculus. I don't know what, it was really weird because in India we were taught calculus since like a 8th grade, I think maybe, and so we were doing calculus since then. But they want to make sure that you've taken calculus in college, linear algebra, real analysis, statistics, econometrics. Those are like the 5 main things that they want to make sure you've taken, and your transcripts should reflect that. And I feel like as long as your transcripts reflect all those main courses, I don't think it should really matter if.
I would agree. Okay, I think we have time for one more question, and one final question from me. Paras asks, how and from where did you collect data for your research on the female labor market?
Okay, so I'm so sad to say this, but data for India has been such an issue. And so, okay, so my research it's like applied microeconomics, and it used data from NSS from 1983. So I had all the rounds from 1983 to 2011. The good thing was that because I'm an Indian citizen, I was able to apply for the data from the US, and it was, I think, relatively cheaper. And I think at that point I had to apply for the data. They gave my parents a CD of the data, and then my dad uploaded the information on the CD to me so I could use it here. And I think now it's become easier because they might have uploaded some links or something on their website. But that's where I use the data from. For India, or at least maybe I don't know of most of these sources, but these large surveys are quite limited. I think there's like NSS, there is IHTS, there's also that NFHS, but that has different set of questions. And I think there's another one that's come out recently, right? The periodic something.
Labor Force Survey, PLFS.
Yeah. So that is supposed to be used instead of NSS, I think. I'm not sure. I haven't used that data yet, and I plan to use it, but I haven't gotten around to doing it. But yeah, those are the, I think, main sources, at least for labor, that I know, that ask a lot of detailed questions regarding labor market and even health. IHDS data is really great because they have a lot of information. Yeah. Oh, another thing I would probably recommend is that if you are an undergraduate student applying for graduate school in the US, try it, and I think Gokhale does that now, right? You get to learn and work on a lot of software. So make sure you mention that in your resumes, and not just like mention that, because what I'm saying it is that in my first year, we were just given assignments in R. And I think the professors expect you that you know these software without really having to teach you those software. So all of my research up to now has been in Stata. I've done some work in R and like very little work in Python, but they expect you to know all of these software when you get to the graduate school. And so if you can get some experience trying to work on these software with large data sets, try and do that, because, even if it might not help you in doing an assignment, at least it'll make you feel confident that you know these software when you're getting ready to do some work, and that really matters. And so, like, for example, when I was working on my data set for the first time in Stata, like, I automatically knew that the first step to do is kind of clean the data, do some descriptive analysis, which apparently a lot of students don't do. If that's like your first time doing it, working on the data, you don't really know how to start. So try to get some experience with these large data sets and software before you get to graduate school. And I think it's better now compared to like when I was applying 10 years ago, because I don't think I had much experience. And Python was not really a thing then. So, yeah.
All right, Smriti, where can people get in touch with you? Email, Twitter, LinkedIn, what would you prefer, if at all?
Yeah. Anyone who has questions, feel free to reach out. I don't mind helping, especially with like this application process. If anyone's interested and has more questions, I know I would have really benefited having kind of a mentor for all of these processes, just because they're so complicated and kind of frustrating. So, you want to have some external help. I have an email address. You can email me. Can I type in this chat?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so my email address that you can use is this. And then I'm also on LinkedIn, but I don't really check LinkedIn much. So I should have more of a presence on LinkedIn, but I will be told. But yeah, so you can message me on LinkedIn. If I don't reply straight away, I'll probably reply in like a couple of days. But email is the best way to reach out and ask questions.
Great, Smriti. I hope you get to visit us in Pune. If for no other reason, at least we can run an RDD on whether you actually are causing outbreaks of COVID. But again,
Oh yeah, no, I really want to come to Pune. I miss the food. I miss good luck and all the tapri outside the hostel and the institute. So yeah, one of my cousins actually went to Gokhale and she did masters, I think, like 3 years ago. So I would get information from her.
The tapris, I'm sorry to say, are long gone. PD is no longer there.
Oh no, really? Oh.
I know. I'm as broken-hearted as you are. But yeah, all the more reason for you to visit and see how much has changed.
Yeah. I would love to do that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for making the time. It was
really thank you, Smriti.
Thank you for having me here. It was great to see you all and talk to you all. Hopefully, I can see you all in person soon.
Fingers